A biologist says, this is going to cause some controversy, that religious fundamentalism could be mental illness. For a long time on this show, we've been saying that the line between fundamentalist religious beliefs and schizophrenic or otherwise disturbed mental illness type beliefs is a pretty blurry line. And now an Oxford University researcher named Kathleen Taylor says that one day religious fundamentalism may be considered and treated as a curable mental illness.
Yes, and we have one for today. Let him introduce himself.
My name is Jouke, and in today's episode I will discuss the topic of scientism.
Don't know much about history, don't know much biology, don't know much about a science book, don't know much about the French I took.
What is scientism, you might wonder? Scientism is the ideology that states that the only knowledge there is scientific knowledge, or knowledge obtained by applying the scientific method.
Well, dear friends, this is as scientific and as good as it gets. It is obvious that Jouke, in a few debates he did not so long ago with Bart van Assen, was absolutely incapable of arguing why the Earth should be flat. Of course, he has no proof at all, and he has never ever done any experiments himself. He doesn't get any further than looking into YouTube videos and his Bible. So what Jouke stands for is what he wants to believe, and he has seen that having no arguments, the best thing you can do is you start to talk about science as if it was a religion, and then they call it scientism, something that absolutely doesn't exist. And next to that, he then likes to cherry pick, and he is looking around on the internet. Where did somebody at some time make a certain statement that he could use for his point? But his point, that the Earth is flat, that gravity doesn't exist, are not being made. The only thing he can do is come up with some vague discussions or statements of people that are completely pulled out of context. So what we will do today is show how the people he has used are actually completely thinking different things than he does.
And this ideology is mostly followed by atheists, agnostics and skeptics who want to do away with God's existence.
You see, he can't win arguments based on science, and he can only rely on a fairy tale book which is called the Bible. And because he cannot win the discussion, the only thing he can do is blame atheists, because apparently if you don't believe, then you do scientism. But if we ask a real Christian about is there any science in the Bible, we will hear,
the scriptures are not teaching science. It's very hard for me to accept not just a literal interpretation of scripture, but a fundamentalist approach to religious belief. It's kind of a plague. It presents itself as science, and it's not.
If the only reality there is what we can test and observe in a scientific experiment, then it would not be reasonable to believe in God's existence.
You see, apparently the scientists are a threat to his notion that the Bible must be 100% true, even the beginning, Genesis 1, etc. And therefore science is wrong. And he hopes to come up with some argumentation given by Dr. William Lane Craig, who just happened to win a debate some 20 years ago, for which he found some old footage. But I will immediately show how that same William Lane Craig thinks about Jouke's stupid idea of that the first pages of the Bible are correct.
We also see this, for instance, in the following debate between Peter Atkins and William Lane Craig.
I can understand why people like you desperately want to believe in God. That is an argument against the existence of
But
God.
two fallacious arguments put together don't make a sound argument, right?
They are,
Possible.
but do you deny that science cannot account for everything?
Yes, I do deny that science...
So what can't it account for?
Well, had you brought that up in the debate, I had a number of examples that I was going to give. I think there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but that we're all rational.
So Jouke, I interrupt him here, because if this guy, Mr. Craig, is right, then he is also right about what he's going to say about your first days of the Bible, Genesis 1, and you don't like what he says, so you just dug a hole for yourself and fell in way deep.
In your view, is that the start of the creation of this earth, or is it the creation of the universe?
Good question. In Hebrew, they did not have a word for the universe. When the ancient Jew wanted to speak of everything there is, he would say the heavens and the earth. So Genesis 1:1 is about the creation of the universe. In the beginning, God created the universe. And it's only beginning with verse 2 that the focus dramatically narrows to the earth. And verse 2 says, and the earth was without form and void. And the remainder of the chapter describes how God turns this desolate planet into a habitable environment for human beings.
There's also a big problem when it comes to the past, when it comes to this ideology of scientism, because you cannot use the scientific method for saying anything about the past.
Yet again, a complete misunderstanding about what science can do and cannot do. And we can say things about the past by looking at things happening now. So he comes up with Frank Turek, who also tries to talk away things like possible evolution or whatever. But do you know that gravity is one of the things Jouke absolutely knows does not exist? So Jouke, do we believe Frank Turek on empirical evidence or on gravity? You tell me. You fell for it again.
Let's take a look at the two types of science. There's empirical science, and then there's forensic science. Empirical science studies the present, whereas forensic science studies the past. Empirical science determines or discovers how things operate, whereas
gravity existed before we knew about it,
That's
Christopher.
correct.
You need an explanation
That's
for
correct,
that.
and Christianity thought it could explain everything.
A problem now is that
So our oxygen thieving simpleton Jouke has already made two mistakes. One of his friends he likes to bring forward just said gravity is always there before we even knew it existed. And one of his brought forward so-called experts said that the first part of Genesis is completely bollocks and should be seen in a different way. Well, I have another one. You also have somebody that you like to bring forward who says flat earth is nonsense. Shall we have a look? Because then I think I've pissed you off enough. You have utterly failed to do your research again. So bye-bye, silly twat.
heavens and earth.
I think the evidence for a designer is so obvious all around us. If you're walking through the woods and you find a painting hanging on the tree and you see no footprints, you see no people, you still conclude there was a painter. If you're walking through the woods and you find a building and you see no footprints, you see no people, you still conclude there was a builder. When you see a watch, that's proof of a watchmaker. When you see a creation, that's proof of a creator, whether you ever meet him or not. There just had to be one.
Oh my god, Jouke, I love my pencil. It's just so silly. Kent Hovind. Don't you know who that guy is? Well, let's have a look about what he says about flat earth and about people like you who promote flat Earth.
The Illuminati or whatever have to make people believe anything. They laugh about it. They can get people to believe literally anything. It is bizarre, some of the things people believe. I'll show you some of those in a minute. It's to distract Christians from the real issues like evangelism, like the Great Commission, get out soul winning. Many spend hours and hours and hours on this topic rather than go win their neighbor to Christ. They're more concerned about winning their neighbor over to believing on a flat earth than they are getting them saved. Stop. Think about that. Go read what Jesus said about that.
Much of what should be called science is actually science fiction. Science and science fiction are mingled.
Well, how do you prove what you're thinking exists?
Oh, God, I wish I finished college.
Oh my God, Jouke, that guy was never a journalist, and certainly not a scientific journalist. He was an actor playing in a fantastic science fiction series, but has nothing to do with science. He doesn't understand science, just like you don't. Please stop, as Kent Hovind told you, stop with your silly flat earth stuff. You make a fool out of yourself and like anybody in our country, everybody in our country.
I rode bus retarded. Damn. To just free myself up to believe that it was okay to be stupid or dumb. People.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about a science book. Don't know much about the French I took.